Hello, my friends. I'm so excited to have a repeated guest back today. Today, we have Michelle Oravitz on the show, and she is an acupuncturist, an Ayurvedic practitioner, and a certified hypnotherapist specializing in fertility health. So, a lot of designations behind her name. Uh, if you have been listening to this podcast from the get go, Michelle was one of my first guests on the podcast. I interviewed her in episode 3. Oh my goodness, episode 3, how to harness your chi or your ki for fertility. And we talked more about the energetics around traditional Chinese medicine and what that looked like with regards to fertility. So without further ado, I'm so happy to have Michelle back. So welcome back, Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, Nora, for having me back on.
Yes, thank you for being here. And today, why I wanted to bring you back, not only because I love talking to you and we always have such great conversations, but I wanted to bring you back on to talk about what so many women and couples in the fertility space use to help them boost, improve their fertility. And I wanted to talk to you about acupuncture because this is such a big topic in the fertility space. And I was looking for an acupuncturist to bring onto the show. You and I had this wonderful conversation for your summit a couple of weeks ago. And here we are now back on my show talking about it. So it's just one big giving circle. So,
Yes.
Michelle, just before we even dive in, can you just remind us again, just your kind of background, how you came into the fertility space, and then we'll get into some of the acupuncture stuff.
Sure. So in my previous life, I was an architect working in New York City, very stressed out, working in the corporate world, and also had irregular periods. I found an acupuncturist after many years of being told the same disappointing result solution, which is go on the birth control pill. And I always knew from the beginning that it wasn't a solution. And then finally I said, Mom, I told my mom, I came back after traveling. The whole time I was traveling for a couple of months, didn't get my period. I was like, this isn't normal. I'm 25 years old. Something needs to get done. And so she said, oh, interestingly enough, I found an acupuncturist that I heard was really good. Let's go. He happened to be actually somebody who specialized in women's health, just happened to be. And he regulated my period. We did traditional Chinese medicine herbs coupled with acupuncture. And not only did I start getting my period back, but I felt better on other levels, like things that I didn't think to go to him for, like my sleep cycle, my anxiety. I had like a little bit of anxiety, at times depression. I just felt more light, more less stress, like things were flowing more easily at work, like just little subtle things that I was like, this is definitely interesting. It's a difference that I feel overall from when I first started. So it definitely intrigued an interest in me. And then, of course, I wasn't really into the work that I was doing. I mean, there were fun times, and it really was more dependent on like the company than the actual work. And I found that I didn't really like doing architecture. I wanted to work with other people. And it's something that really influenced my life and also gave me my fertility. Because if I hadn't have done that, like in my 20s, I would have had to do it at another time and I wouldn't have even known it existed. I mean, it took me over 13 years to figure out that that was even an option.
Mm.
So I was always interested in fertility health, and I eventually went back to school. So I started out with Ayurveda. We moved to Florida after my husband finished his residency, and I started out with Ayurveda, then took off for a little bit, had my kids, got into art, just different things over the years, and then went back to school for acupuncture once they were old enough. And just has really intrigued me to work with women and women's health and specifically fertility. And then, of course, got into hypnotherapy as well, because I found that the mind was so important. It was such an impactful like aspect of overall health, fertility health, because deep-seated beliefs can really hold you back, or if they're conscious and you're choosing your beliefs to help you, then it can actually help you and be a source of benefit.
Wow. That is so. I have so many questions with like, how do you help your patients? Like, do you mainly specialize in? So I know you live in Florida, and I know you have an acupuncture practice, but at the same time, with the acupuncture practice, do you're a certified hypnotherapist as well? So are you doing like hypnotherapy on them while you're doing acupuncture on them?
I
how do you work with your
was, I
clients?
was, I was originally, and I had a little more time a couple of years ago, but now things have gotten busier. And what I decided to do, and I actually like felt like it would be better for them to listen to audios every single night consistently, the same ones preferably. It's better than switching all over the place because it's better to really anchor and like take root in the subconscious mind. So I created audios specifically, like one for egg health, one for uterine lining. So that those two are great for like retrieval transfer if people are doing IVF, or menstrual cycle regularities, ovulation. I even went on like food if people had issues like changing their diet, because we could tell them the best foods for them, but diet is so behavioral that sometimes you need an extra something to help you break through a pattern. So I created an online hypnotherapy membership, which anybody can utilize, like even online or my inpatient. When people come in, I automatically, like just to my patients, always give 30 days free. It's just kind of it's part of the protocol that I always do. It's just kind of like a gift when people first start with me. Just also the reason I did that was because I feel like if people try it out, they're going to see benefits, and I want them to at least get a month of benefits from it because it really does help.
Yeah, I've recently been doing, for the last couple of months, actually, some of my own, just these guided meditations in the evening before I go to bed. If I can't get it in before I go to bed, I'll make sure to do it sometime during the day or sometimes even first thing in the morning. Like I have my specific ones, and it's more for like, just it's not necessarily specific to fertility, but it's like building a thriving business and
Yeah.
manifesting my life partner,
Anything
whatever
that
you
you want.
want, whatever you
Yeah.
want. And one of the big ones that I've been focusing on is gratitude and appreciation. And a lot of that is built into a lot of these guided meditations. So just actually have a question for you now. The guided meditations is it the same thing as like a hypnotherapy? Guided meditations and hypnotherapy, can they kind of go hand in hand? Like, because I mean, you've got these probably like alpha, beta beats in the background, which are getting your brain waves into states of, I'm sure, some wave that is allowing us to tap into the subconscious a little bit more deeper. And then, she's speaking in her beautiful voice and it's nice and slow. Like I could just lay there and my whole being just like melts, and I can start to feel all these like tingling sensations and pulsations in my body. It's quite fun and fascinating and very rejuvenating, I should say. But I'm curious, hypnotherapy, guided meditation, do they go together?
So there's a possibility that if you tend to be somebody who is more apt to get hypnotized or is more open subconsciously, you can get to a state where you're able to receive those messages. But hypnotherapy specifically is different in the sense that we start out with an induction. So you're very intentional in the way that you're designing this so that you're creating this induction phase before you even get any suggestions in. So the induction phase primes the mind to get into a state of receptivity. Once you get into that state of receptivity, that's when the suggestions come in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I kind of see how in the guided meditation that I do, now that you're saying that, and I think back and think about, because usually these guided meditations, I'll do like 30 to 60-minute ones because I'm like, I need that time. The time
Mm-hmm.
really allows me to get into the state. But I'd say probably for the first 5, 10 minutes, she's taking you through like this body scan and she's just kind of relaxing you. And then
Yeah,
she starts to get into all of the new seeds that I guess we're trying to plant in our subconscious to take us out of, or just to change our habits, our behaviors, our neural pathways in our brain, and
right.
all that stuff. So
Yeah.
cool. Cool. Okay. I know we said we were going to talk about acupuncture. Now I feel like I want to talk about hypnotherapy the whole time.
We'll talk
Okay.
about whatever. Oh,
um,
actually, I think I did actually send you a link for a free 30-minute, no, sorry, a free 30-day trial for the hypnosis audios. And
amazing.
it's
So we'll
not just
make
the
sure.
audios, it's also a toolbox
Great. So
for mindset.
we'll make sure to have those in the show notes for those that are available for people who want to try that. So thank you for sharing that with the community. And okay, so going back to acupuncture now, I wanted to ask. So I mean, I think most people know what acupuncture is, but if you want to just tell us in, a sentence or two, like what is exactly acupuncture, and then I have a few questions on how it pertains to fertility, and I've got one specific question I can't wait to ask. So I'll start with yeah, what is acupuncture?
So to put it in the most simplistic terms so that people can understand it, just think of a circuit, right? Like our body is a circuit. And it's interesting because I always say that we design things as humans that are actually very much reflective of our own design, if that makes sense. So if you look at like highways and then you see like smaller streets in between, or like, so the highways could be like the aorta or arteries. And then you look at like ones that are in between are veins. And then you see these tiny little roads that lead off to like dead ends. Those are the capillaries. So we see a lot of these patterns, right? Those patterns are also internally, energetically, like circuits that bring energy to feed our body. And that's really what keeps our body warm. So it's called this chi, right? Chi is not just energy though, it's life force, vitality. So it's not, people say it's like energy. Yes, it's kind of like electricity. That's one aspect of it. But another thing is like this life force. It's kind of what animates us. And it also is what warms us. And it's also got intelligence. So it's all of those things in one. If you look at like Ayurvedic medicine, they talk about prana. It's very similar. And oxygen, it also has oxygen. Oxygen can increase chi. So it's a multifaceted thing that even with our own minds, we can only comprehend to a certain degree because there's just so much more than what we can even comprehend. So, but this thing called chi gives us life. It breathes life into us. And in some senses, we can stagnate over time, or we can live outside of what our body needs. So we go against ourselves. Like if we're tired, we stay up later. If we're hungry, we don't eat. If we either overeat or undereat or overexercise or underexercise, we just don't live in harmony. And what that does is it makes our body have a harder time to fix itself and to get into the self-regulating mode. And so it can cause like chi stagnation or deficiency of chi. And so you have like these roads inside our body that are taking the energy from one side to the next. They go deep in the body, deep in the organs, and all of the different channels. Each organ has a different channel. And some organs are even paired, like the yin and the yang aspect. And so all of these have this road going internally really deep. And every so often it comes to the surface. That same road eventually ends up like on the surface of the skin. So it kind of goes up for air. I call it like, I kind of get that mental picture of it coming up for air. And when it does, or where it does, those are the acupuncture points where you're actually able to access the same channel that's shallow in that spot, but is actually really deep somewhere else in the body. So you're able to access that. When you're able to access that, you can unblock, you can awaken the body's ability of moving that chi, moving that energy, you're awakening that circuit. And when you're doing that, you're increasing vitality overall in the body, which eventually reflects in reproductive health. So I think we miss that. We go right to reproductive health, but reproductive health sits on overall health. So no matter what you want to do or how you want to treat it, we don't really treat the symptoms. So when you talk reproductive health, we actually go to the root cause. Whatever is underlying is causing that issue. It's the underlying that we should focus on, not the issue that gets manifested, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so that's one aspect of it. Yeah, we're looking at like really overall balance by looking at patterns. And this is how we like ask questions, look at the pulse, feel the pulse, look at the tongue. And then we start to make an assessment and get a picture, a clear picture of what's going on. What are the imbalances? How does it show up in a person's emotions? And that will definitely help us figure that out. That's one aspect, overall balance. The other aspect is local points. So, sometimes we can treat distally and then other times we can treat locally. And that's where we put a lot of acupressure points or acupuncture points on the pelvis area. And that I can describe almost like in Western terms, you're creating an immune response when some foreign object, it's called the controlled injury. It's a foreign object that's going into your body. So that's going to alert your body, but it's safe. It's controlled because it's sterile, and you sterilize the skin. You use needles once. You don't ever use them twice, just like any doctor's office. You'll never see a person use a syringe and then go and take it somewhere to clean it and then use it again the next person. It's just not going to happen. So anything that goes in the body, just to get that out there, including acupuncture, is always only used once. And then we throw it out. So it's completely sterile. But when you get it into the body, it's going to cause an immune response. And you'll see actually like around the needle, you'll see a lot of times redness. And that shows the blood flow is coming in because it's like, hey, what's going on? So what that does is it alerts the body, hey, you got to get things activated and you got to balance it out quickly. So it'll bring more blood flow to that area, which is great. It's great for egg quality. It's great for uterine lining. It's great for getting things activated, for hormonal balance. And it gets everything
detoxifying as well, because you're pulling all of like
Yes.
the red blood cells, which is bringing oxygen, iron, B12. You're bringing those white blood cells, which are kind of healing and kind of fight off any sort of infection or whatever might be hanging
Correct.
around.
And also, especially for IVF, or even for like, we work on many different ways when we're specifically targeting fertility health. We do, I get people on not just herbs, I don't do herbs for IVF, but like supplements. And it's amazing when the blood flows more strongly, then you're actually able to get all those nutrients, like you just said, into that area. But also when you're doing IVF, you're actually able to optimize the hormones that are trying to grow the eggs into that area. So you're actually optimizing that
process. Yeah. Okay, great. So as you were explaining what acupuncture is, and you were talking about how we've got all of these, like, somebody mentioned something to me. Okay, this is like just coming off the top of my head, and it was such a great analogy. And now I feel like I want to figure out how I want to apply to this acupuncture thing. But I remember her saying, I was talking to some health professional, and she's like, well, we're all just a bunch of tubes. And then I was like, well, that's interesting to think about. Inside our body, everything is just a bunch of tubes. Our veins, our digestive system, like everything is literally a tube that is carrying some nutrients or information to another area of the body in order for our body to function and work. So what I'm hearing from you then is, I guess with regards to acupuncture, think about maybe one of these tubes like being a garden hose, and it's twisted and there's like a kink in the garden hose. And so then that energy or the whatever is flowing through that garden hose gets stuck, doesn't flow properly. And so what you saying is that when you're putting in these needles in certain acupuncture points on the surface of the skin, which are then connected to, as we now know, deep different parts of the body internally, it's able to release some of those kinks, open up those pathways, allowing for more flow and balance to happen. So that, because again, the body knows what to do. The body is designed to work optimally, but as life has it, and we're busy, stressed people, and we only know so little. If we actually think about it in the big picture, like relatively speaking, we know so little about the body. We're getting better, but it's going to take time. But that acupuncture allows those pathways to open up. Am I correct in assuming all of this?
Absolutely. And I just thought of an analogy I've never thought before in my life, but I think I'm going to start using it. Because, okay, so I see a lot of times you actually are trained to look for a specific response from the patient. And it doesn't happen with every single point, but you will get, it's called de chi. It's like obtaining the chi. You can almost feel or even see a pulse happen. And usually when you see that, the patient is feeling the channel. They start to feel it shooting, almost like this instantaneous. And I feel like it's almost like activating peristalsis, but of the chi, the chi channel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we need to explain to the listeners,
Yes,
maybe someone
that's true.
doesn't know what peristalsis is, but
Good
us
point.
nerds over here love this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll let you explain what is peristalsis.
So peristalsis is the body's natural digestive system. Another thing that can also get lazy over time, but basically when you eat, if you notice, after eating, you kind of feel a little full. Sometimes you'll want to take a walk. Taking a walk actually really activates this peristalsis. It's basically like this contraction that happens through your digestive tract that gets food to flow into the different parts. So you will feel this urge to eventually poo. We love the topic of poo, right? And walking tends to activate peristalsis or support peristalsis. And it's just basically, it almost looks like a worm. If you think about a worm, the way it moves and it starts on one side and then like the skin starts to contract and move all the way to the end. So it's kind of like that. It's getting like that movement. Sometimes that can actually become lazy or not as active as it should be over time with people who are constipated. So you can actually activate it with certain things. So when you're activating that aspect, you're basically activating that movement that is necessary for the body to message different parts of the body or get like feed different areas
and give feedback to the different
tubes,
parts of the body.
right?
Yeah, we're a bunch of tubes. It's a good one, right? You're going to use that now.
It's good, yes.
Okay, so now that we have like a general foundational idea of what acupuncture is, and I will say a lot of my clients, as part of their fertility, plan, most of my clients do acupuncture as well, which is great. I see so much benefit. I see how it improves their fertility outcomes if they're working with IVF, IUI, whatever it might be. But I mean, just for general health as well. But I will say, okay, so I want to ask you, and this might be like the biggest question that people always want to know, was like, how long does it take? So it's like, how long does it take until someone starts doing acupuncture that, and I know this is more than just like, it's going to be 3 months answer. I know that that's not the final answer, but especially when it comes to, and I don't know if you see this in your practice, but especially for a lot of my clients who are having irregular menstrual cycles and getting their cycle back to, the optimal parameters of getting it between, 29 and 34, 28, 34 days, having a healthy period, ovulating in that time. Have you noticed like the duration of how long it would actually take to start seeing these different improvements with a regular acupuncture practice?
I wish I can give you like a straight answer, but I cannot. I just can't, because I'm like, as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the different patients that I have. And it's almost like saying, how long will it take to build muscle? It depends. If you're like a naturally muscular person, like much faster. And if you're really flabby and it just takes a little longer, then it might take longer. And
there's so many other variables. No, but if you say it that way too, we have to think about, okay, well, is the person also eating enough protein to build that muscle? Is the person sleep? How old are they? Are they sleeping enough to regenerate and repair that? So, I mean, I'm asking you this question.
What kind of life have they had before coming to me? So have they had chronic conditions that are so long that the body really needs kind of to be reconditioned to a different? It's almost like you're changing the pattern of the body. It's almost like changing the pattern of your subconscious mind, because your body is your subconscious mind. So you're really rewiring so much, and it takes a little longer. And then sometimes it also depends on the person's stubbornness, not just the person, but the body. So
Mhm.
body and personality. Like I've seen people who are a little more stubborn, and I'm not saying this to put anybody down. I'm stubborn. But like
We all are to
people who
some
are
degree.
but there is a stubbornness, not just mentally but energetically, that will stop the process, that will slow down the process. They still get better. It might take a little longer. And then
Mhm.
usually it's interesting because like the stubborn ones are the most impatient too. And it's like, well, if it's all about like letting go and kind of really opening it up to the process. So I will say that sometimes that takes longer. And then I have people that don't expect it to take a lot longer, come in within weeks, like so many changes that within weeks they get pregnant and they have a full term
Mhm.
pregnancy. It's healthy, everything like, and these are people that have gone years without conceiving, which is crazy to me. It just happens. But then there are people that are like, okay, I'm expecting this to take longer, and sometimes it takes longer, and sometimes
So
it's so
variable.
many
Yeah.
variables. But I will say, I always say, give it at least, I wouldn't even say 4 months, not even 3 months. People say 3 months. I would say give it that extra buffer, at least
Mhm.
4 months before making any conclusions on whether it's working or not. I've had before doing fertility, I was doing pain, and sometimes I still get people being referred to me for pain, and they come once and they're like, it didn't work. And I'm like, oh, it just doesn't work like that. I wish it did. It's just not a magic bullet. It's not.
Yeah.
You really need to take the time and give it time to work, and also do the things like you said at home. That makes a big difference as well.
So what type of fertility conditions have you like do you come across the most in your practice? I'm curious, like PCOS or people going through fertility treatment or amenorrhea. Like, do you notice in your practice like generally a like a theme? Um, Curious to know.
The most I see are people that have been like diagnosed with low ovarian reserve
Hmm.
that are actively trying to do IVF, or some that have been seeing reproductive endocrinologists and decided to do it on their own, at least first. Those are the people that I've seen, like lots of people that have been told that they can't really conceive on their own, or they're very low quality, low egg quality, or low reserve, and um or that are approaching menopause. Like I hear all those things and I'm like, and I see them doing really well naturally. So it's just I think that that's why I feel so strongly about that message of getting that hope out, because I don't like when people get their hope defeated on something that I have seen in my own anecdotal evidence
Hmm.
is not the case many times. More times than not, it's really the diagnosis and the prognosis are not accurate.
Likewise, I share the exact same sentiments. I really do. And I think, podcasts like mine, you also have a podcast, you have the Wholesome Fertility podcast. And I think really, I mean, the message is getting out there more and more. Um, people are searching and seeking, and they're not taking, that the diagnosis for like the final answer, which is great because it allows people to also know that like there's there's so much else out there that you can do to help you bring
Mhm.
your family into this world. Um, so if somebody were to start, and again, I know this is probably going to be another it depends answer, but I'd love to just,
It's
as
okay.
a
I love the questions though. They're good.
it's still I'm sure I'm just trying to think of what are people thinking in their heads about like, oh, if I were to ask an acupuncturist a question, what would it be? And so I think another question, other than how long will it take, is how often would you recommend come into someone come in and do acupuncture?
So typically 2 times a week would be ideal if you can start. Now, if you have a lot of stagnation can show up in a lot of stress. Chi stagnation, you might have irregular periods. You might also get fibroids. And so stagnation starts in the chi, but it can go to the blood when it does, you can have like tumors or, excess. So excess conditions like that, where either excess weight or excess, just like, I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes it could be excess and deficiency. When you're deficient, you might tend to be like more anemic or tired, or just drained. Sometimes with deficiency, you don't want to overdo the acupuncture. I don't see many patients though that are like super, super deficient, where I would not suggest to do 2 times a week, but 2 times a week is a good amount of time. But if you have excess, even 3 times a week, I would say just in the beginning to get a foundation and to get the body moving. So like think about stagnation, something kind of stuck. You want to get that stuff moving. And in order to do that, you have to almost like clean the energy a couple times in order to get it like really, okay, the body's like pushing it out.
Yeah, because I think about it as like if you do it once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks and you've got to get the stuff moving, it's like you do the work. It's like you take a step forward and then you if you don't go often enough, maybe you take a lot of steps back. So when you go back, you're taking another step forward. But then again, if
Right.
you're not going often enough, you're kind of doing this dance of like back and forth, stepping back and forth, and not really giving your body that opportunity to push and move forward to get the outcomes that
Correct.
you're looking for.
Definitely. And I would say though that some people do once a week and they do fine. They do really
Hmm.
great. So I've seen people still get the great results that way, but 2 times a week is a really nice, it's a nice foundation, especially in the beginning. Once every 2 weeks, I feel like is a waste of money.
Okay,
It
either
just
don't do it
doesn't,
at all or just like I see what that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
yeah, doing that, you're going to get something, but you're almost wasting your time. It's better to, you really need to be consistent with it for it to
Hmm.
truly work.
Hmm.
And then later on, you can start minimize or, coming in less, but at least you got the body like activated.
Hmm. Hmm. And so now I want to flip the script because I've had a couple clients as well. So when I work with my clients, I work with them as a couple, both male and female. The bulk of the coaching and the work that I do is with the female, but I mean, this being in the fertility space that 50% of infertility cases are male factor. And so we know, I see sperm results and analysis come across my eyes on my computer as I'm going through my intakes with my clients all the time. And I will tell you, 95% of them are subfertile, suboptimal. So
Mm-hmm.
I did have a client last year where her partner, so he had quite low sperm parameters. And again, there's a lot of things that we can do to optimize that. Again, you mentioned this at the beginning, and I say this probably every single podcast, and I will say it until the cows come home. But my mantra is as well: your most fertile self is your optimal. Wait, now I just screwed up the wording. Your most fertile self is your most optimal health self. I'm not saying it in the right way, but it's pretty much what you're saying. Is like the fertility is, or your reproductive health is the positive consequence of your overall health just being optimal. So yes, we have to do all these other things as well. But have you ever treated male patients? And is that something that you come across in your practice? Um, I'm curious. Yeah, I've had a couple male clients with their partner be totally open and receptive to doing acupuncture. So I'm curious if that's something that you experience as well.
I have, but actually very rarely.
Yeah,
It's almost always the woman that comes in. It's
of
almost
course.
always the woman. And many times I have mentioned to the woman, hey, how about you give your partner X, Y, and Z to help on that level? And then they'll do that. They'll give them certain supplements that help with the mitochondria and like
Hmm.
try to get like the antioxidant intake increased. And then I'll suggest too, because sometimes they just check the sperm count and the sperm analysis, it doesn't really cover the DNA. So after a while, I suggest doing a DNA fragmentation because because you can have perfect count, you can have perfect everything, but you don't really know what the DNA is being put into the egg. And
Right.
that's really important because that can impact how it fertilizes. It can impact, the success of the pregnancy. So that's another thing. Another thing that I notice is sometimes when the sperm count isn't great, they usually just go right to IVF.
I know. Which is really annoying. I see
Because
that all the
it's
time.
actually a lot more simple to treat men. I mean, you
Yes.
could treat them just with supplements. I mean, you could do the acupuncture is great too, but the supplements are, could really help a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And again, giving it time, like I mean,
Yes,
I'll say
correct.
minimum 3 months, but at least
Mhm.
3 to 6 months of like and consistency is just like you said with acupuncture and the supplements as well. The consistency is so important. And I see that all the time too. I've had clients come to me and say they've been doing multiple rounds of IVF because their partner's sperm parameters have come back abnormal. And that's not even just concentration, but like the morphology is the big one. The
Yeah,
motility is how well do they swim, but the morphology is what we're really seeing
the
the
shape.
numbers exactly. Like how are they formed? Do they have a head? Do they have a tail? Do they have two heads, two tails? Do they have a half a head, a half a tail, one head, no
Right.
tail? That's the
Yeah.
morphology is so in the tank. It's like the
Yeah.
World Health Organization says if
And
you have
that
four
tells you about the DNA too, because it's showing that
exactly
it's not coming out correctly. It's like it's not following the DNA instructions. Something's off of the blueprint,
right.
and so you probably need antioxidant increase and like really protect that. But think about also like cell phones that are in the front
Yes.
pocket. I think that
Yes.
radiation could definitely screw up like your DNA. And not just that, I have so many people tell me, oh, my husband doesn't want to stop drinking. My husband doesn't want to stop smoking. We're smoking weed. I'm like,
Mhm.
it's just a couple of months for him.
Yeah.
For you, you can carry and you're really gonna have, you know what I mean? Just a couple of months. Come on.
Yes,
you know.
yes, yes. We got to meet everybody where they're at, and that we
Yes.
can we can all just educate as much as we can. But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, that's I know I see the struggle too sometimes. Um, well, this has been great. Is there any other kind of piece of information or thing about like, frequently asked questions for people who come in for acupuncture that you can think of for the listeners who are trying to get pregnant listening to this right now?
Well, I always go down to self-care, but that's kind of like I've said that before. I mean, really just listening to your gut, especially when you are figuring out what is right for you. Even with my own patients, I notice that sometimes I'll suggest something and they're like, no, this just doesn't feel right, or this kind of food doesn't feel right. And I'm like, okay, immediately I pivot to whatever is right for the person. Like find somebody, whether it's an acupuncturist or whoever's working with you, that is going to work with you and is going to listen to your intelligence, kind of your own internal intelligence. And
Mhm.
I suggest more important than them listening to that, I think you should listen to that.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Just trusting your instincts. I mean, I think I always I know people ask me this, and I usually have the same answer. And I always ask my guests what what's your like, number one tip or last thing that you would want to share. And everybody always says, trust your gut. And
Mhm.
it's so true. It's so true. So if it's
Yeah, it's
just a
so important.
reminder, yeah, if it's just that reminder that you hear every single day, like, you're going to be listening to this podcast in the divine time for you to get whatever message you need to get from it while you're listening to it. And if
Mhm.
it's the one thing is just continue to trust your gut, listen to that little whisper, that intuition, then we've done our job.
For sure.
So, Michelle, tell everyone where they can find you. And again, I'll make sure that we put the hypnotherapy links in the show notes below so that they get access to that. But you tell us about your podcast. You've got a great Instagram account. So, yeah, tell us where. Well, first of all, I guess if somebody wanted to work with Michelle, she lives in sunny Florida. Lucky, lucky lady. So you have to be in Florida to work with her. But yeah, tell us
Not
about who.
necessarily. I also do online coaching as
Oh,
well. So I do online
yes.
consultations, and acupressure is really important. I actually do prescribe acupressure for people online at times if need be. But
Mhm.
I do have the Wholesome Fertility podcast, and then my Instagram is at the Wholesome Lotus Fertility, because the Wholesome Lotus is my in person. So it is kind of confusing, but it's at the Wholesome Lotus Fertility. And my website, you could pretty much find all of this on, is michelleoravitz.com.
Awesome. And we will link all of that below so they don't have to worry about remembering Lotus in the handle for Instagram.
Yep,
Well, thank you
totally.
so much, Michelle, for your time and for your knowledge today. We very, very much appreciate it. And I'm sure I'll have you back maybe next year at this time again. It seems to be, I think we did our first interview like this time last year, and here we are at the
Yeah.
second one. So maybe we'll have you back for a third next year.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Nora.
Thank you, Michelle.